Gurudev ki jai. Shri Sadguru Goswami ki jai. Vinam Prabhu ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Dham ki jai. Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. Gaur Pranam to all, good morning. Hope you have had a very thrilling morning program over there. Okay, Rigupad is confirming that. So if he says so, that was it. So we are continuing today with a series of discussions and reflections on the significance of the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. For us as Gaudiya Vaishnava aspirants, it's a way of trying to also get to know more in detail our legacy, if you will, our DNA, our background. And sometimes people in this world want to know, I don't know, who are their ancestors and make some DNA test, and they can grasp some influences that make them who they are on some level, at least of the sense of personality. In one sense, we are trying to do some form of DNA test here, trying to grasp which has our roots in the context of our Gaudiya lineage. Of course, in the beginning, we may not have too much of a clue about that. We come and we have, Krishna and Prasad and devotees, and it's okay. I mean, we cannot get all the overwhelming information in one single shot. But in time, naturally, it's interesting to know where all this is coming from, basically. And as we mentioned, who are the the masterminds of our sampradaya, of our school of thought, and how they were masterminded by Mahaprabhu himself, if you will. Because, as we mentioned the other day, and today I would like to concentrate, of course, also on the figure of Srila Rupa Goswami. And he was a mastermind in connection to his. Oh, sorry, I'm making a play of words, but he was mastermind in connection to his master's mind. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam, so was able to know what was in his master's mind, in his Prabhu's manas. So before going there, just a brief recap of what we studied briefly yesterday. We were speaking about a little bit, some words on the meaning of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, on what's the very meaning, on some level at least, of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, of Gaudiya, of Vaishnavism, how all this converges in the figure of Mahaprabhu, because Gaudiya has to do with what Mahaprabhu is about, internally and externally in the form of dispensation, and Vaishnavism has a lot to do with the Vaishnavas. Mahaprabhu is Krishna as a Vaishnava, testing something in particular, and therefore extending a particular experience to all of us. So, we cannot. Mahaprabhu is our Istadev in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, basically, in Gaudiya Vedanta. He's the presiding deity of our sampradaya, which, as we know, the very word sampradaya has to do with pradaya. Pradaya means like a profuse giving of something in particular, something in a full way, in a very comprehensive way, a particular type of thought, if you will. Sampradaya could be translated as a school of thought. So a particular thought is given. Some thoughts in certain direction, as we say yesterday, also a particular focus in regarding transcendence. It's a very unique and specific tradition, and at the same time, that we are very specific doesn't mean we have to become sectarian in the negative sense of the term, because sometimes these two ideas may conflict with one another. No, you are in a really very detailed and a specific tradition, how to remain universal, while becoming more and more specific, because the more we progress in our practice, naturally, the more it's a relationship. We are developing a relationship with Bhagavan, so supposedly your relationship will go from generic, abstract to extremely intimate and specific. It's like basically with I think every relationship. In the beginning, you meet someone and you fall in love, and that falling in love is still an abstraction, with all respect, in the sense of all the details are yet to come. And then you will realize how much you fell in love. And of course the tests come, and the relationship comes, and the details come, but all those details, if properly dealt with, constitute the very foundation and life of the relationship. And the first days of the falling in love, I mean, are appreciated, but are not enough to just keep the relationship going. Do you remember those 3 days when we met? And spring was there, and we were just like throwing some flowers to the air. And we were just, yeah, it was nice, but life moves, goes on. Like I say, if it's like if I go to my mom and say, "Mom, it was so nice when you were giving me your breast milk. Can we return to that chapter one more time?" And she'll say, no. Because it was beautiful, we have to make that more beautiful in this particular chapter. So now you go to work and whatever. And earn money and bring milk to the house and something like this. So in a similar way, in our tradition, we are to progress towards specificity in a gradual way, not in a forced way, but naturally our progress should go in the direction of becoming more acquainted, and not only with who Krishna is, who Mahaprabhu is, but who represent his, how to say, his alankar, his ornamentation. Because that's who he is, basically. That's an important point in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. You cannot speak about Krishna, as we say yesterday, without speaking about love of Krishna and how that love of Krishna is qualifying Krishna in a particular way. You put a particular type of bhakti next to Bhagavan, to the Absolute, and he will take a particular form. You invoke the presence of Hanuman, and Sadbhuj Mahaprabhu will just remain with a bow and an arrow, basically, because Hanuman's bhakti will invoke that particular form. I mean, the other four arms will be there, but there are two that will shine more brightly in the presence of someone like Hanuman, because again, a particular type of bhakti creates a particular type of Bhagavan. Try to follow my poetry, I'm not saying, but that's the definition of Bhagavan in the Bhagavatam. I really like that definition. The Srimad Bhagavatam say Bhagavan Bhakta Bhaktimam. Who is Bhagavan for us, for the Bhagavatam? Bhagavan is the Bhakta of his Bhaktas. That's Bhagavan. Brahman, Paramatma, other features of divinity, as we know, all pervading, effulgence, localized, inner guide for those who are not necessarily connected with bhakti, but the more bhakti enters into our life, Bhagavan starts to be the deity, if you will. And there are so many faces of Bhagavan. And Bhagavan has all to do with reciprocation with bhakti. And we have Bhagavan Narayan, Bhagavan Ramachandra, Bhagavan Krishna, Dwarka, Mathur, Imraj, Bhagavan Sri Gauranga. And why so many Bhagavans? Because so many flavors of devotion, basically, that create, that carve, if you will, in a poetic way, the figure of Bhagavan. The form of our deity carving out as a result of a particular bhakti impacting Bhagavan. He appears in this way, like ourselves. If our grandmother comes, we will be carved as grandsons immediately. We will behave accordingly. You won't behave with your grandmother as your wife or your boss or whatever. I mean, this particular rasa there, if you will. So that applies to us here in human relationships. And your son comes and you become a father. I mean, you already are a father, but you enter into that rasa, if you will. Your wife comes, that's another way of dealing with, and so on. So similarly, originally, the type of affection you present to Bhagavan that will make him reciprocate accordingly. According to how you approach me, I transform myself into the proper object of devotion. Bhagavatam says the similar thing. What's the verse? Paribhavita Harit Saroja. How does it begin? Sutrakshito. Say, okay. Basically, it says, according to how each of your devotees, Brahma is praying here, according to how each of your devotees is worshipping you, meditating in you, you will appear to them in a corresponding form. But it also says srutekshita. It means it's not. It doesn't mean that okay. So that I will meditate in Krishna having a blue jeans and riding a motorbike, a Harley Davidson, and he has to appear like that to reciprocate with my back. No, it's not like that. It's not like a whimsical parade of possibility. But Sruta Ikshita. No? Sruta means hearing, and Ikshita means seeing. No? So seeing through the ears, which means according to how the different forms of Bhagavan are revealed to Shruti or through Shastra, no? There are certain possibilities. It's not like whatever you think he has to appear. But among the different varieties of possibilities in connection with Bhagavan, which are a lot, according to how you meditate in one of them, he will appear accordingly eventually. That's the fruit of your meditation. So again, this important point, Bhagavan is the devotee of his devotee. He lives to reciprocate to Bhakti, Bhagavan, Bhakta, Bhaktiman. That's the very idea of Bhagavan. Again, the idea of God, as we generally conceive that in our Abrahamic sensibilities, Judeo-Christian DNA, in some of us at least, is more akin to, I'm exercising my English with you, I have to need some, akin to the notion of Paramatma generally, because for us generally God has to do with the world and us here in the world. But the Bhagavatam says Bhagavan, Bhakta, Bhaktiman. He's somewhere else playing with his devotees. But Paramatma is the one dealing with the world and the jivas on this planet. So the jivas without bhakti, and the more Sarup Shakti and Bhakti enters into our life, more Bhagavan, Paramatma becomes Bhagavan, let's say, in our heart. My Guru Maharaj will say the more Paramatma becomes kicked out and replaced by Bhagavan. That's a famous example of Sri Hanumanji. He tears apart his chest, no Paramatma, no longer Paramatma there, but Sitaram, his sister there. So in the same way, Bhagavan, Bhakta, Bhaktiman. So some ideas we share, I'm still in my in the recap from yesterday, but some other ideas came in between. I know that Brigupad becomes a little bit nervous when my summaries become more than 10 minutes. He knows that. You can see his arms. By mudra, he's pointing at all the different things. I appreciate it. Finnish timing sensibilities. So we spoke about yesterday about that, Vaishnavism, and how love of God is for us, in one sense, above God, not because God is less, but because if there's love of God, God will be there. My Guru Maharaj will say, you can speak about God and people may say, I believe, I don't believe about God. But if you say, if you meet someone who loves God, that will be much more difficult to deny. The example of that person, whatever is like overflowing from those type of personalities, their example, the way they live their life, their ideals, that's complex to deny totally, as we may deny the so-called invisible reality of God. So love of God further confirms, if you will, the presence of God. Whatever there is love of God, there he has to be. Sadhava hridayam mayam sadunam hridayam tvaham, says Bhagavan Narayan. What to speak Krishna below. He says, in my heart are my devotees are my heart. I'm in their hearts, they are in my heart. And I don't know anyone apart from them, they do not know anyone apart from me. Basically, we are really falling in love. And that falling in love doesn't last for a week or 3 days or something. So we shared some ideas about that yesterday. I will share some notions on Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami's Tirobab Mahottam in his life and contribution amongst the contributions of the six Goswamis to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So today we will continue sharing some notions on Srila Rupa Goswami, who is the next Goswami who met Sri Chaitanya Dev after Sri Gopal Bhatta. And again, all this in the context of what's the I mean, so many things can be said about Srila Rupa Goswami. I know of devotees that sometimes organize also like whole series of lectures on Rupa Goswami for days and days and days. And so, and it's yet not enough. That's the point. And that's the idea. When we organize those, the other day, some devotees organized for Guru Purnima also like a whole week of Hari, or I don't know, a week, but at least 3-4 days without stop, 24 hours about speaking about glories of Sri Guru. And the idea, of course, it's not that you reach a point where you say, oh, I don't know what else we can say, but you finish the whole thing. I feel so much more can be said. This is not enough. So we need eternity. Eternity is necessary for the fullest expression of Harikatha. Ananta Katha Rasasya, Kim Brahma Janma Vinananta Katha Rasasya. So the real experience of Harikatha is that. Real Harikatha will get you closer to eternity, because you will speak and hear and go into this type of dissatisfaction, transcendental dissatisfaction, non-mundane dissatisfaction, that you speak about Krishna, but there's something telling you, I can never say enough. We can always say something more. We can always say something more. What's Vedanta saying about that? Ikshatirna Shabda. So it's not so much that we cannot say anything about the absolute, but we cannot never say enough. So let's continue, and let's continue, and let's continue forever, for eternity. So, but something, we will try to make justice to the figure of Sri Rupa Goswami by at least trying to say something invoking his blessings. So, as we mentioned before, Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale. Swayam Rupa Kadamaham Dadati Sapanantikam. Narottam Das Thakur prays in this way. I throw myself to the lotus feet of Sri Rupa. Why? Because he's the mastermind of the master's mind. He really knew what's in the mind of Mahaprabhu, which is not an easy affair. I mean, you have to enter into the mind of Mahaprabhu and come back alive to tell the world what's that about. That's not a joke. And not only that, but to establish a whole system, a whole systematic approach to Mahaprabhu's mind, to Mahaprabhu's desires, to Mahaprabhu's mission, basically. That's the mission of Mahaprabhu. I remember once one sannyasi, a good friend of mine in Govardhan, he told me intensely, he looked at my eyes and opened his eyes like this, basically. And I was with him, my eyes open like this as well, hearing him. He told me, like, Maharaj, do you know what's Mahaprabhu's, what does it mean to belong to Mahaprabhu's mission? And of course, last thing I will say is yes. So do you know what does it, and he said in such a way that of course the answer should be no. So do you know what does it mean to belong to Mahaprabhu's mission? No, I have no clue. So please tell me. I know whatever you have to tell me, it's not what I'm planning to say. So I don't know, please tell me. So I say, well, what's Mahaprabhu's mission? It's Mahaprabhu's mind and desires. Whatever are his desires, that's the mission. Whatever mission we have, institution, buildings, we call that a mission. We tend to identify the idea of mission with the hard form, if you will, of institution. But mission also means I have a mission in my life, like ideal. And that's a mission. We may put some bricks together to facilitate the attaining of the inner mission, but mission is never only an external stuff. That's what Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta himself said. I mean, they are misunderstanding all this marble here in the Bhagavatar. I put together all this marble to facilitate the pursuit of the ideal of Gaudiya Vedanta, of Mahaprabhu's inner desire, but they are getting entangled and attached to some bricks and marble and some corner where to sleep. This is my room. This is my seat for hearing Maharaj's class. All of you are sitting in the same place. Always be careful. It all begins with detachment to where do you sit in class. And he said, I mean, they are misunderstanding the purpose of the mission. Because if there is someone who really gave shape to the notion of mission as an institution in Gaudiya Vedanta, that was Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He really made this idea of mission and the math and the monastics and of course that was further expanded then. But he make the point. I mean, you are not, he said, if you get entangled into all these bricks put together and you only think in terms of mission in relation to the, how to say, hard institution, not the subtle form of it, better I will sell all the marble right now. And let's print books and let's go deep into what the books have to tell about. And let's understand what's the mission, the real mission. So similarly, again, Mahaprabhu has a mind, has a desire, or three desires, if you will, many more, but three, described as three by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. And there is a mission coming out of that, because he has a mission. Gaur Lila is Krishna in a mission, basically. You have that expression in English, like, I'm on a mission. On a mission, okay. So Gaur Lila is Krishna on a mission. A particular type of adventure, if you will, trying to taste Radha. Who knows what will happen? Who knows how the mission will end? Will he be successful or not? What will happen in the midst and so on? So many nuance elements there. So Rupa Goswamis generally pointed as that person. That's why sometimes all our 6 Goswamis are kind of put together under the shelter or shade of Srila Rupa Goswami, even though Srila Sanatana Goswami is the elder in the context of Gaur Lila, and Rupa Goswami himself refers to Sanatana Goswami as such. At the same time, in many ways, Srila Rupa Goswami is really mastermind of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. There is one nice verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Guru Maharaj likes to quote, which is one of the few verses in Sanskrit from in Chaitanya Charitamrita that is composed by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami himself, and which depict the condition of Rupa Goswami, the function of Rupa Goswami as mastermind of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. So I will share it with you for a moment. You may know it, but this is in Madhya Lila, chapter 19, first verse, the very first verse of chapter 19 of Madhya Lila, which has to do with this section where Mahaprabhu is instructing Rupa Goswami and empowering Rupa Goswami. So generally, many of these chapters, I don't know if in every chapter, maybe Prabhupada may tell me, but in almost all the chapters of Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's one first verse who will give in a seed way. I don't know if every single chapter has that verse. Everyone.
Every single chapter.
Okay.
Not every single.
Okay, great. We have some diversity of opinion there.
At least in 2 chapters, it's the same. Same beginning.
I'm not saying the same verse in every chapter. I'm saying if every chapter has a seed verse that presents what the chapter is about.
Yeah, no, I mean that there's at least 2 chapters that have the same seed verse, but almost every chapter has its own seed verse.
But not all.
Not all.
Okay. We'll continue later with the discussion. Have the char and the successors. So they have to know how to deal with it. But yeah, we find many of them, Ramananda Sambad, or which kind of gives in a nutshell what the whole chapter is about. So this is the first verse, chapter 19 of Madhya Lila, which of course will speak about Mahaprabhu's empowering Rupa Goswami for making all this that we call now Gaudiya Sampradaya. So the verse says, Vrindavaniyam rasakeli vartam kolena luptam niya shakti mukta sanchara rupe vyatanot punasa prabhur vido pragi valoka shrishta. So there is an analogy made here between Rupa Goswami being instructed and empowered with Mahaprabhu and Sri Brahma receiving illumination at the beginning of creation by Sri Krishna himself. So the verse, the translation given by Srila Prabhupada says, before the creation of this cosmic manifestation, the Lord enlightened the heart of Lord Brahma with the details of the creation and manifested the Vedic knowledge. In exactly the same way, the Lord, being anxious to revive the Vrindavan pastimes of Sri Krishna, impregnated the heart of Rupa Goswami with spiritual potency. By this potency, Srila Rupa Goswami could revive the activities of Krishna in Vrindavan, activities almost lost to memory. In this way, he spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world. So, this is a very interesting verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which creates this parallel between Rupa Goswami and Brahma. Sometimes that comparison has been given in some books of Rupa Goswami. Of course, Rupa Goswami is Rupa Manjari, but it's here and there also he has been connected with Brahma for different reasons, but in this case, like the mastermind of the Sampradaya. So, of course, we could say also there's here two beginnings of our Sampradaya are being mentioned. First, Krishna with Brahma, because that's in one sense the official beginning of our Sampradaya, beginning of creation. Krishna, first member of the Parampara, enlightening Brahma when there's nobody else there to enlighten, and giving eventually, as we know, Chaturshloki, Bhagavat, and so on. And all that is part of what we call nowadays as Gaudiya Sampradaya. But then Krishna himself coming as Mahaprabhu, and similarly enlightening, in this case, Srila Rupa Goswami. Interestingly, in the beginning of creation, Brahma receives what we call antardarshan. Antardarshan means you see Krishna in your, how do you say, inner quarters, your inner self. Krishna is not appearing outside, but inside. And with Sri Rupa and Mahaprabhu, Krishna is appearing outside. So generally, it's considered the Bahir Darshan as hiding, basically. Krishna is not only appearing inside of you, but in front of you as well. So we will speak in terms of an upgraded re-inauguration of the Sampradaya when Mahaprabhu is instructing Srila Rupa Goswami. Of course, there are many other, we may speak about other beginnings of the Sampradaya from different sides. My Guru Maharaj likes to also present the importance of Sri Nityananda Prabhu as another form of inauguration of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, and not officially, but extra officially, when he started to go door by door and basically beg, Bhaja Gauranga Ka Gauranga La Gauranga Kijana Gauranga Syamara Prana. And everyone was, the whole neighborhood was converted, basically. Imagine someone like Nityananda Prabhu crying, knocking your door, begging, crying, and giving Mahaprabhu with full hands, full disposition, and I sell myself to you if you just say Gauranga. Who could resist that idea? No? So that was like one very interesting beginning of the, or re-beginning of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. He traveling with his associates, Dwadasa Gopalas, and starting to initiate villages and villages and villages before the Goswamis themselves had systematized Mahaprabhu's ecstasy in the form of their books. Guru Maharaj likes to describe the Goswami's books as a soft institutionalization of Mahaprabhu's ecstasy. Very interesting idea, because it gives, I mean, it's putting the ecstasy, something that is really, and if you speak about ecstasy, it may sound too like ethereal, if you will. No? So to put that in a book, it's a form of giving shape to that, making that a little bit more approachable. And of course, there's another level of institutionalization that came in time, but the book is in itself a very important form, as we will see. Especially the books that Srila Rupa Goswami wrote has a lot to do with what Mahaprabhu is about. Even Chaitanya Charitamrita, also my Guru Maharaj will say, Krishna Das Kaviraj is writing it, but it's how Mahaprabhu is seen through the eyes of Srila Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami is there as a lens for all of us. We may know it, we may not know it. We may think about Krishna and Mahaprabhu and they practice in a certain way, and we may not know the one to blame is Srila Rupa Goswami, if you will. But eventually in time, it's nice to awake to those realities, to say, oh, this particular way of seeing Krishna Mahaprabhu, the practice, life in itself, oh, this person is instrumental, is crucial in this idea. His contribution is that. So what I thought it was my own view of things has a connection with someone else who thought in this way before. So it's important to awake to this type of things. And you start to realize how much indebted you are, how much you have received from so many sources, even without knowing that. That's a very humbling, necessary experiences. The more we progress, how much we are being sustained by the contribution of our previous acharyas. So again, Nityananda Prabhu is the first contributor we have to mention, not only the concept of Krishna Bhakti, but this special also emphasis in Gaur Bhakti. Prabhu say chant Krishna, Nityananda say chant Gaur. Emphasis in the reality of Gaur Lila as a unique eternal window of opportunity. But going back to Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Prabhupada will say, interestingly, in the line of the famous verse, Sri Chaitanya Manavishtam, I'm sitting like this, and someone, the function of Rupa Goswami is to establish the feelings of Sri Chaitanya. That's the function. Again, going back to the idea of the mission. So each Goswami is empowered to engage in a particular function in connection to what Mahaprabhu is about. Every Goswami is exhibiting a complementary, I mean, they are like a unit. It's nice how they are called. I mean, they are the 6 Goswamis. They are individuals, they are unique in themselves, but also they are an inseparable unit at the same time. Teamwork. They are a teamwork. Not only in sitting with their books and sharing thoughts and peer review, as we mentioned these days, also that's crucial, but also in the functions and how Mahaprabhu empowered them in a complementary way, so they could perform different functions that all put together, again, make what we call Gaudiya Sampradaya. And as we will see, every Goswami's contribution and function is crucial, even though that of those who may not seem so like overtly crucial, like, I don't know, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. What did Raghunath Bhatta Goswami do? Someone may say, well, his main service was cooking. Someone has to cook. I think all of you have experience in this retreat. If prasada is not in place, retreat is not in place. We leave the place altogether. Someone has to cook. So he was also so much famous for reciting the Bhagavatam in different tunes and ragas with particular feeling. And someone said, and that was it? Yeah, that was it. But with full feeling. Full feeling. That's what sometimes it is described. For example, Sri Thakur Bhaktivinoda is described in his Nitya Swarup in Brajas Kamala Manjari. He's doing camphor lamps for eternity. I mean, it's not that he doesn't do anything else. And there's some necessity of service. Oh no, I only do camphor lamps. But the emphasis is for it. I mean, try to imagine if I tell you have to do camphor lamp for a few hours. It still starts to become a problem, basically. So what to speak of eternity? Because the thing is not so much, and one may think, camphor lamps only? Cannot I open a temple and write some books and open a mission? Only camphor lamps for eternity? But which is the flame of that camphor lamp? Or which is the place where you are doing each one of them? It has such a repercussion in eternity that it's more enough. One of those camphor lamps are more valuable than hundreds and hundreds of buildings and bricks and a marble put together. So that's the power of that realm. My Guru Maharaj will say, when one of those village girls, like the Goswamis, they are manjaris in Vrindavan, one of them come there, and only one point of all that they are about they have so much knowledge in the Braja Lila. They're similar to uncivilized village girls. They won't quote. They won't know any single Vedic stotram by heart. But when they come here, they are drowning the whole universe with oceans of knowledge, because that's the necessity of the moment, to exhibit some knowledge, some vairagya. We will speak about that maybe today in the afternoon. Have you sung till now Sat Goswami Astakam? Not yet. We may sing it today and then try to elaborate on that. But how the Goswamis exhibited all this knowledge, all this vairagya, which is there in Braj, in the background, underlying reality, but it's not coming to the foreground because it's not necessarily for the mood of the Lila. So that's Maharaj will give this example, like United States having, well, at that time, no, I don't know now, maybe Russia now or China, which is the most powerful weapon country in the world. US, okay, still US, still Srila Maharaj's example remains updated. So he said they have all these tanks and bombs, but they are not parading on the daily basis on the street, because that will create some interruption on the natural flow of relationships. But if someone is attacking the place, all those stuff will come from the Pentagon and all these sections where they have all this stuff. So that's there, but no necessity of that. So, but whenever that's needed, that comes out. So in Braj, this peaceful, idyllic, bucolic lifestyle, no need for renunciation and knowledge. That will be a disturbance there. But when those same people come here to the world to establish a mission, as we mentioned, that's required. That counts. One single village girl from there can drown the whole world. So Rupa Goswami is one of them. So, as we mentioned, his mission, Srila Prabhupada will say, is to establish his function, Rupa Goswami's function. Remember, we are speaking about each Goswami having a complementary function. Some may be totally well known. Rupa Goswami will be like, okay, he's Rupa Goswami. As we mentioned, Raghunath Bhatta, he may be the anonymous Goswami. Someone has to be the anonymous also. That's a function. Someone has to contribute with anonymity. Anonymity. That's a contribution in itself. Or what Gopal Bhatta yesterday was a little bit like that also. Don't mention my name anywhere. That's a contribution. And some others will be in the spotlight with full humility. That's a contribution. So the mission, the function of Rupa Goswami Prabhupada will say, it's establish the feelings of Sri Chaitanya. This is not a joke. This is a very delicate, very artful notion. And of course, that means what is Mahaprabhu about, what he's experiencing. And in order to do so, again, as we mentioned these days, he's not writing directly, immediately, overtly about Mahaprabhu, but he's writing a lot about Krishna and Vrindavan and Radha, and describing the absolute in terms of rasa, which is a really important contribution by Srila Rupa Goswami, which will require lots of hours to unpack. But this is a very unique notion that Brahman is rasa. I mean, it's mentioned here and there. Taittiriya Upanishad says rasu aisa rasi rasam kevalam latvanandi bhavati. But that line also can be taken in different ways. Srila Rupa Goswami took that Upanishadic dictum and made the whole doctrine out of that. Bhagavan is aesthetic, the words of my Guru, sacred aesthetic rapture. That's one way of translating rasa. Another way of translating rasa, Prabhupada, what will you say?
That's a very good translation.
Okay, let's keep there. I was not saying it was not good enough, just in case. So rasa has to do with this. Of course, it's a very complex expression, but it has a lot to do with dramatic dynamics, with arts and beauty, and the capacity of how all of our being can be consumed by a particular type of emotional experience, basically. And of course, that's connected with something that was already in place at the time, called the Natya Shastra of Bharat Muni, which is this dramatic scripture, basically, on the different, like, and I particularly feel so much attracted to this when I met the devotees. I mean, I didn't know all the details, but I was studying Indian classical music at the time, and there is a lot about tal and raga and rasa, and being a sahridaya, and being a proper empathic audience and relishing the different new. So, and then finding, oh, there's a whole spiritual process presented in those terms. That's why, wow. If you're an artist, for sure, that will be a tempting banyan to enter. So Rupa Goswami made this whole thing in books like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He's presenting Krishna and the whole Bhagavad doctrine, but all seen through the lens of rasa, and explaining how, of course, Bharat Muni didn't speak about all the rasas as Rupa Goswami spoke, 5 primary ones, 7 secondary ones. We won't explain that in detail now. But Rupa Goswami took that and started to analyze how Braja Krishna in particular is the perfect fit, what we may call Akila Rasamrita Murti, of the perfect object of rasa. There are many verses in the Bhagavatam that depict this. When Krishna is entering the arena to fight with Kamsa, and everyone is seeing him according to their own bhava, basically. And there's a verse in the Bhagavatam that mentions how 12 different types of people see Krishna according to the 12 rasa that Rupa Goswami present, the 5 primary, the 7 secondary. There's another verse when Krishna is lifting Govardhan, which show, in this case, how not everyone else feels all these different rasas simultaneously in relation to him, but how he himself experiences the 12 main rasas simultaneously while lifting Govardhan in connection to the different devotees and experiences. So from the two sides, Krishna is this Akila Rasa and Britamurti, the very term rasa, ultimately connects to him. So Rupa Goswami books like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Ujjwal Nilamani, he's doing that. He's presenting the absolute in aesthetic terms, in terms of the ultimacy of charm and beauty, and the perfect fit for all of our emotional, how do you say? Yeah, thank you. Because again, at the end of the day, we're still emotional beings. So, and Bhakti is not about doing away with emotions, because sometimes that could be a mistake. In the name of transcendence, we became a stone, basically, and stop feeling altogether, and that's forbidden, and that's Maya, but I mean, but Mahaprabhu was criticized also by being too emotional, but by those whose heart was like a stone, basically. But the very goal of bhakti is to melt the heart, and the melting of the heart is done on emotional terms, but a certain particular type of emotion, for sure. We are in the very beginning of the practice. We cannot just make a quantum leap to bhava sindhu, to the ocean of emotion. We can enter into another bhava sindhu, which is samsara. It's another way of speaking about. So in the beginning, we have to discipline our emotional makeup and filtering it through the lens of Shastra. So the Goswamis very interestingly have provided that as well. They have provided our Bhakti Shastras, lots of philosophy, as we'll say, lots of Siddhanta, lots of Tattva, to put our emotion, our material emotions in context, to put our dislocated emotional makeup centered in the perfect object of all emotions, and on top of that, a whole new emotional life will come. So Rupa Goswami presented in his treatises all these, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Ujjwal Nilamani, many others. Interestingly, books like Lalit Madhava and Vidagdha Madhava, they are dramas, they are plays that he wrote. It's very interesting to study them, very aesthetic. I mean, if you have to really enter into the language of reading a drama. Recently I was studying these two, and at one point it was complex for me to study them because there was so much dramatic ingredients that if you are not familiar with them, you just kind of follow the whole sequence of dialogue, and so much indirect language, so much parokshavat, that it becomes so indirect that it kind of like you get lost into, because it's really indirect. But the indirectness has a particular charm. But we have, again, it requires some discipline and some training of the ear on how to appreciate all these type of things. Rupa Goswami wrote a lot. We cannot go in detail with that. He wrote more than 100,000 verses. So not as much as Jiva Goswami, for example, but that's still a good amount. Different books, Lagu Bhagavatamrita and Stavamala, the compilation of different stotrams and Padyabali, Padashamrita, Udab Sandesh, Hamsaduta, Lalit Mala, Vidakta Mala, and so on. Utkalika Balari, that's a very nice book he wrote at the end of his life. We find different types of writings in Rupa. Kalika Balari has to do with exclusively Manjari Bhavan. It's a whole series of desperate prayers in that connection. I need to say that's the last book he wrote. So also interestingly, sometimes in the Goswamis we can see some, like, how to say, unfolding of their presentation, and we see that the very last works generally have more to do with realm of rasa and bhava and the particular ideal and desperate trying to enter there. But at the same time, hopefully you give me some extra minutes today. At the same time, in someone like Rupa Goswami, we find a very interesting combination of ingredients, because we may hear all this and say, okay, he's so high writing about rasa and bhava and all this stuff, so but I'm over here, so I don't know if I can relate to a person like him in any way, because it seems to be like living so much in the heights of transcendence. So, but also at the same time, the Goswamis in general, Rupa Goswami in particular, he exhibited so many, like, how to say, human common sense and practical criteria and about how to deal in the world and the need for that in the context of serving Mahaprabhu, so that we have also maybe relate with that more than with dramatic rasic sensibilities, and so we have to begin somewhere, no? So, for example, we have the famous moment when Rupa Goswami divided the wealth he has and giving some in charity to the Brahmins, giving some to Sanatan Goswami, and saving, giving something, to the family, and saving something for emergency cases, no? Which eventually were used for Sanatan Goswami to be freed from the prison. So that's an interesting point, because I mean, he's Rupa Goswami. You can say whatever. So many things one could say. You are keeping something. You are not a Goswami, or something like that. He's not keeping something for him. He knew. I mean, the climate of the time is such that there may be an emergency situation at any moment. So he considered, I will keep this. And at the same time, families there, Brahmins are there. So Brahmins means social considerations are there. And still, lokavichar, in the words of Rupa Goswami. Lokavichar means the consideration of the world. What the world is, public opinion. On some level, that's to be taken care of, especially if you're inaugurating a sampradaya, what the world will say about this. Okay, new guys saying that the Bengali boy now is their god, and so on. There has to be some grounding in every sense, in practical reality as well. So he was really very expertly navigating these waters and of the social time. For example, when he constructed the Govindaji Mandir in Vrindavan. Have you had the chance of being there? Who had the chance of being Radha Govindaji? Okay. Radha Govindaji ki jai. So that's a unique piece of art to begin with. I mean, what to speak about the, of course, inner significance. And if you have some taste for that, you will realize this is not only Indian architecture. There are some Muslim ingredients mixed there, and there's a purpose for that. It's not just like Rupa Goswami had still some an art towards Muslim culture, and he was attached to that, and he couldn't just. It was not that. He's coming from Golok Vrindavan. He knows how the temples are constructed there. No? And there's no Muslim sensibilities there, with all respect, for sure. But he considered we have to include that here because the situation is such, the times are such, society is such. I mean, Indian were ruled by Muslims at the time. So it's a way of, and he was himself, he was, how do you say, sponsored at times by Muslim rulers. It's not that only Indians were like, okay, let's Jai Rupa Goswami. So it was a very expert way of dealing with the world. And he was Rupa Goswami. Yeah. My Guru Maharaj will say he had this huge temple, but he himself was sleeping under a different tree every night. So it's not that the temple was for him and he was concerned. I mean, he has his own inner life, and he was Rupa Goswami 24/7. But also being Rupa Goswami 24/7 implied dealing with the world and with reality in a very practical, landed to earth way. So this is an important point, because sometimes we as devotees may like not be very expert in like harmonizing these two sides, no, the side of transcendence and the deepest reach of the tradition, and the world. Or what we were saying before, no, like very specific and detailed in our ultimate attainment, and universal at the same time, having the capacity of dealing with others and so on. So some ideas I want to share with you today about Rupa Goswami and being a Rupa Nuga, which also we spoke these days. The term Rupa Nuga follows of Sri Rupa, both in terms of his identity as Rupa Goswami, and for those who had affinity towards the ideal of Rupa Manjari, as the leader, also being a Rupa Nuga there's a place for that there. But again, you can be a Rupa Nuga while having another affinity that apart from that of Manjari Bhav. That's an important point that sometimes have created some friction among some members of the Gaudiya community by thinking only you are Rupa Nuga, you follow Rupa Goswami in every single sense of the term, and so on. I don't think that if you have some affinity towards whatever Priyanarma Sakhya Bhav or something, you are not following Rupa Goswami in every sense of the term. There are so many ways of following Rupa Goswami in every sense of the term. So this Rupa Nuga Bhakti, again, it's a very specific thing. It sounds like a form of exclusivism or sectarianism, but it's not. I mean, there's a way to speak about being sectarian in a healthy way. The word sect is not necessarily something wrong. You belong to a particular sect, to a particular group, with a particular focus. And there's place for that, while at the same time you can appreciate and nourish from the contributions of everyone else. That's a very challenge and ideal for us as Rupa Nugas, no? In the name of pursuing our specific ideal, at the same time, how we can remain universal and nourished from everyone. That's a standard established by the Goswamis themselves. And with this, I close. I remember Sanatana Goswami mentioning this over and over again. His Brihad Bhagavatamrita, with the ontological journey of Gopakumar, for example. And Gopakumar has his ideal Sakhya Bhav, Vrindavan, from Madan Gopal. But on the way, he's finding so many devotees with so many affinities for different faces of the Absolute again. So you may think, oh, this will end in a constant clashing. No? But that's not the case. No? For example, when he meets Hanuman in Ajodhya, the two of them meet each other and they realize, so our Istadev is Braja Krishna, Ramachandra, but again, in Tattva, they are the same person. Remember this part. Yesterday, Venkatavata say the same thing. Narayan and Krishna are the same. So Gopakumar, what did Gopakumar ask Hanuman? He didn't say, you have to surrender, I convert to my Istadev. And Ramachandra, there is no such deep rasa as you find in Vrindavan. He didn't say nothing like that. He said, please glorify your Prabhu, your Istadev, Sri Ram. So Hanuman started glorifying Sri Ram. Gopakumar heard the whole glorification, and his conclusion was, Jai Madan Gopal. He saw, oh, my bhakti for my deity has been nourished by hearing your glorification of your deity. Thank you so much. And then Hanuman said, please chant the glories of your Prabhu, chant the glories of Madan Gopal. So Gopakumar starts performing kirtan and that. And Hanuman hears, and at the end he will say what? Jai Sri Ram. So that's the perfection of ecumenical dialogue, if you will. No? I mean, we meet each other not to try to convince you are lower and higher or whatever, but like to nourish from your particular perspective. Oh, that's incredible. And that's the way. You know, if you find some devotee of that, the same applies amongst us as sadhakas. If you find a disciple of someone who is not your guru, you won't try to convince that person, glorify my guru or something. Do you know about the glories of my guru? But you will humbly ask, submit, please say, sing the qualities of your Prabhu, of your guru. And by hearing that, it's not that my faith starts to become disturbed. Oh my God, I want to get reinitiated now or something. But I feel, oh, thank you so much. You have nourished my faith in the Guru Tattva principle. And I appreciate the position of your Gurudev. And naturally, then will be a chance for speaking about the glories of one's Gurudev. That's the idea. And that's how it works in the higher quarters, basically. So if you want to enter there, if you want to approach there to get closer and closer to there, we have to begin here and now. And again, the Goswamis are really our standard for everything, basically. And this is no exception to that rule. So, some ideas. I don't know if there is any question you may like to share, present today, comments.
In the last part, I was wondering if is there Ram Bhaktas in the Nitya Lila then? Like all kinds of different bhaktas in a Gaur Lila in Nitya Navadvip. Is there going to be like Ram Bhaktas that we can have this kind of ecumenical glorification, nourishing glorification with?
Don't kick Murari Gupta out of Nitya Navadvip, please.
Right.
You want to meet Murari Gupta there? You will. Yeah, Gaur Lila offers that particular possibility, no? Interestingly. So yeah, if you say that personalities like Murari Gupta or what's the name? Balaba. I mean Anupam, not Balabacharya, but Rupa and Sanatan's brother. I mean, they have another brother. They were brothers in themselves, Rupa and Sanatan, but there was a third one, as you know, he was having this affinity towards Ram Bhakti, even though he had these two, powerful personifications of Braja Bhakti samskars in his life, but it is said he was inclining to this direction, and Mahaprabhu approved that. He said, blessed is that devotee who cannot give up his Lord, and blessed is that Lord who won't give up his devotee. So in this way, yeah, there is place for Ram Bhaktas in Gaur Lila. Gaur Lila is really accommodating, very interesting experience. So that's a very important venue to investigate Gaur Lila in eternity and all that takes place there. Something else? From the devotees also, sorry, connected here, I will give the chance to unmute in case you have any question. But from the ones present here?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Because recently you did the lengthy interview about the sort of Vaishnava controversies and how it relates to like levels of Adhikara, Kanishta and Madhyam, and how actually only Madhyams are able to properly debate. And I was thinking how this somehow how this also relates to Guru Tattva. So many times instead of honoring others' sacred Guru Nishta, they see, because so many different gurus have different emphasis on different details, and so many times people get caught up in those details and say, even to the extent of saying, we are not representing the same sampradaya because we differ in details. So if you get say something on this, like how this, Adhikara proper conduct relating to honoring Vaishnava and Guru.
Yeah.
Other gurus.
Do we have time, Raghupa?
Yeah.
Okay. So Yeah, I know what you are speaking about. I've been labeled recently as I do not belong any longer to Bhaktivinoda Parivar. It sounds like this for some. So what to do? Yeah, I remember my Guru Maharaj will narrate this situation when Dr. O.B.L. Kapoor, Adi Keshav Das, disciple of Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta spoke to Srila Prabhupada in the last years of his manifest Leela and said, Swami Maharaj, he really he appreciated what Prabhupada was doing and told him, he was asking because he was seeing how there's a place for this, as we'll see, how Prabhupada was, of course, emphasizing a lot uh, that his disciple focus on him as his guru. And of course, at that time, there was not that plurality of missions around the world and so on. So there was not too much of other possibilities for Prabhupada's disciples to look at. No? To begin with, there was no social media even. So O.B.L. Kapoor, the case of tell Prabhupada, I understand. I think I understand why you're doing this, but I'm afraid that in time your disciples may just not take seriously anyone apart from you. And Prabhupada said, yeah, I get your point and I understand your concern and I appreciate that. And of course, that's not the idea. But what I'm doing now in this particular stage of culturing there, and he gave the example of the like putting the seed in the ground and I'm watering that, I'm nourishing their process in these initial stages, and I have put some fence around. So the fence is there. So whoever is growing inside doesn't know anything outside of the fence. No, it's not thinking outside the box, as they say. No, it's only inside the fence. Only me, only this. There's nothing else. Do not. But as they are growing inside the fence properly, because they are growing, they're being nourished by me. He was saying. At one point, the seed became a sprout, and the sprout starts to grow and starts to become vine-like, and starts to grow outside of the fence. And starts to realize, oh, there are many other fences and, and sprouts and vines and sadhus. But at that point, they already have the proper like rooting, so they are able to deal with that otherwise overwhelming diversity outside of the fence. But before, I mean, the standard to know when you are able to deal with that is when you are seeing outside above the fence. Before that, if you cannot see anything else, it means you have to remain there. So there is a place for that type of sectarianism, if you will, in the context of taking care of the baby, basically. No? Like you have a baby, 3-month old baby. I mean, you cannot just expose the baby to anything and just let him know the world and experience things and relate to people. I mean, he has to be somehow like isolated in one level for nourishing, for taking care. So in that context, that's why it's mentioned that if someone has a Kanishta orientation, and that we try to make clear, it's not a fault to be a Kanishta, it's not something that shouldn't be happening, it's something that should happen. I mean, that's the beginning of Bhakti Adhikar, so that's glorious in itself, but that's not the last stop of the journey, if you will. So for those who are in that stage, ideally, they should be under the guidance of someone who is not in that stage, but higher, at least Madhya and Uttam. So that person will know how to deal with them, as Srila Prabhupada was doing so expertly, nourishing them and taking care of them, but knowing in time they are expected to see beyond that. And and of course, regarding your question, it's complex because it's not like this is the magical formula for their, so we don't have any more conflicts and any more these struggles in social media. And I'm proud, I mean, that will still happen. But Thakur himself mentioned this idea that among the Kanishta and the Madhyam, that's a difficult combination because there are two different constellations altogether. What one needs to grow and to feel nourished will be an obstacle for the other person, will be like suffocating for the Madhyam. But whatever the Madhyam needs, depth and variety and nuanced thoughts and gray and not black and white, that will suffocate the Kanishta. The Kanishta will need a much more like maybe simplistic, and again, it's not that this is wrong, this is bad. I wouldn't even say this is better or worse in one sense, even though Kanishta is expected to go to Madhyam and so on. At the same time, it's the best thing for each one of them. That's my point. I mean, if you really need to be a Kanishta, the best thing possible for you is to be a Kanishta, proper. But that implies also that you will be protected from the Madhyams or something. And vice versa. No? But again, this is not that. It's delicate because nowadays with social media and all this stuff, all the things get so much like mixed. Because as I was speaking with Namrasa recently, for example, we were having this discussion recently of does the jiva fall from Golok? Does the jiva fall from Vaikuntha? Does the jiva fall from Brahman? Does the jiva fall from anywhere? or where does the jiva come from? Does it come from anywhere? Is there some, and all this type of things that some may think about. Again, I receive lots of messages saying to me, Maharaj, why you are speaking about these things? I mean, there's no need to think about those things. You see the gopis. The gopis are not speaking philosophy. They're just happy knowing that Krishna loves them and that they love Krishna. So, and I respected the opinion of the person. I mean, basically, I felt you need not to think about those things, and it's perfect. But the danger is you are trying to convince me that I shouldn't also think about those things, while I may need that. So, and by the way, those girls in Vrindavan that do not know anything, when they come in Gaur Lila, are the ones who wrote all the books we are trying to quote when discussing these topics. So there is a connection there. But the point we were saying is that some of these discussions are not for everyone, and not to enter into some sort of elitistic, puffed up, and only it's reserved from this, from that, but in a sensitive way, I'm trying to think how to better serve each person, how to render seva. Rupa Goswami says that, no? You have to nourish the innocent, you have to worship, love Bhagavan, be friends with the devotee, and avoid the envious. But he says, all of those types of criterion are to be engaged in the context of seva. How I can better serve the envious, avoiding them. What to do? I would like to embrace them, but envy doesn't allow that. So the best possible thing I can do in service of them is take a distance. But still I do that in service, in the spirit of service. So it's important to have that in mind. Whatever stance I take with Kanishta, Madhyam, whatever, it's all in the context of rendering seva, not that thinking, oh, you're a Kanishta and this and that. So the point is, some of these topics are not for everyone, but social media means I click something and I'm in the discussion that I don't have a clue if this is for me or not. And I didn't ask permission to anyone to click link because I understand it may not be practical to write an email to your guru and send the link and Gurudev, do you give me blessings to enter into this link? It's about to start, please reply quickly or something. It's a very different dynamic than the disciple being in the Gurukul with the guru living together and receiving personally. The world has changed, so that brings some challenges, but nonetheless, I think, again, some of these conflicts may be unavoidable, but ideally we should try to avoid them as much as we can by promoting with our own example and our own immediate circle. Like I think nowadays this is a very nice concrete proof of that. We are so many different from different sanghas and affinities and disciples of different gurus, and we are not jumping on each other's neck, hopefully. There are 2 more days, let's see. But I mean, that's the idea. I mean, of course, each one will need our own space and inner circle for more intimate things or for really expressing certain feelings in connection to one's guru, and that's perfect. But there's also place for getting together like now and sharing in so many ways. And that's really, for me, powerful, like reference for the Vaishnava world. Hey guys, it's possible. Man, we cannot kill each other and get together at the same time. But yeah, at the same time, certain maturity has to be there, and a lot has to do with, if we don't have that maturity, at least who is guiding us? What's the maturity coming from that side? Because if you are sectarian, narrow-minded, the ones guiding you have the same mindset, that may be more complicated. And again, each case is very unique. But yeah, somehow we should try to promote that by example, I was saying. So maybe yes, I don't know if that helps. There were some other hands raised. No, you raised your hand before.
Yeah, but yeah, I can ask it later or something.
Okay. Yeah, I will say, because now it's 9:20, so we don't go. If it's no problem, if it's no urge, we can today, later, we can, after the lecture, continue with more Q&A. So thank you so much for your time again. Srila Gurudev ki jai. Shriman Shishat Bhuj Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki jai. Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Sriji Yogopal Vadadas Raghunath Sad Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Pramanand. Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasimhate Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Hari Bol.